So welcome everyone to The Upside. So this is the first of what we sincerely hope will be many conversations with members of our community who are tackling and innovating and otherwise constructively engaging with this, I don't know if it's post-COVID Brave New World or current COVID Brave New World, but this world that we've woken up and found ourselves in. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Breen Sullivan, and I am the founder of the Fourth Floor. And I'm also the Chief Administrative Officer and General Counsel of an education technology services company called Watermark Insights with around 400 employees, where we span a couple of continents. We have offices in a few states, but we're headquartered in New York. So first, I just want to very quickly, a word about the Fourth Floor. We are, as I think most of you who've joined this call know, we are an exclusive ecosystem that helps get women general counsels and executives on boards and helps women founders get funding, via their advisory boards. That's sort of the simplest way we can explain ourselves. There is more to it, but I think if you think of the Fourth Floor as an escape hatch from, the classic chicken and the egg problem that makes it really challenging for women to get on boards, makes it really hard for women to benefit from the sort of backroom dealing and, and also for female founders to get funding. That's what we are. So, anyway, we are exclusive. If you are interested in applying, you can do so via the website. If you fit our membership criteria, we encourage you to do that. So I'm also here with my co-founder, Sarah Feingold, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me and Breen and everyone else. And I hope everyone is safe and healthy wherever you're working from today. And my name is Sarah Feingold. I'm a co-founder of the Fourth Floor. I'm also a career in-house attorney. I was Etsy's first lawyer and 17th employee. I was there for over 9 years, helped take the company public. And I'm also right now very passionate about getting women on boards and helping women founders help scale their companies by putting women on their boards that can help scale their companies. So thank you so much for coming. And Breen, tell me, why are we even calling? Oh, and the way that this is going to work today is we're going to have a conversation, me and Breen. I'm going to interview her. Then we'll have a couple quick housekeeping things for anybody who's interested in some other of our programs that are coming up later. And then we'll have a Q&A with anybody who has some questions. So that's how it'll work. So anyway, my first question to Breen is, tell me, why are we even calling this series The Upside? Like, why is that the name of these talks?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Sarah, because I am very excited by the concept behind the upside and really excited to talk about it. So I understand it might not be immediately obvious why ensuring business continuity during a global pandemic provides an opportunity to reorder our society for the better, but it does. And so this is the, a long way of saying that speaking about business continuity in the time of COVID is actually a great way to kick off this conversation series called The Upside, which really at its core, the point of it is to focus on how when you have a major crisis, it actually provides an opportunity for society to reorder itself, for the better and for the worse. And so we realized, not just this one example of business continuity, and I'll make that point later, but just in general, given who we are in our community and all of our incredible members, we are uniquely positioned to, promote and harness some of that reordering society for the better. So we're just really excited to explore how we can best do that. And so I think one way to think about it, it's an unprecedented crisis like this, right? It forces society to adapt quickly, to adopt change, whereas otherwise it might take 50 years to get there. And so therein lies great opportunity. Necessity is the mother of invention. And so the very specific example of business continuity in my talk today, my company, just unfortunately, very much they were against flexible work arrangements, telecommuting, working from home, and it was very difficult to change the mind of, really the CEO and a few others at the top of management. And so by, today, 3 weeks into responding to this, global pandemic, I have to tell you that the culture of my company has forever changed. So now it is clear that flexible work arrangements and telecommuting is in fact effective. So this is one simple, small example, but it's compelling of how, there is an upside. There is an opportunity here for society to, to change quickly and to innovate. And so, so anyway, that's why this talk is kicking off, the larger conversation series.
Really interesting. And I really hope that we'll continue these conversations about like what everyone thinks about what could be the upside, like what is going to happen moving forward. But we are here to talk about business continuity. And I think that's just what we should probably be talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, Breen, like, listen, when the unexpected happens, usually, I don't know, companies turn to their lawyers, right? Or to a team. How do you define business continuity and how do you think about it?
Right. So, so certainly this has fallen to me as general counsel in my career at the companies where I've served. And so granted, I've been with mid-sized tech companies, smallish to mid-sized, rapidly growing companies that have not had a dedicated compliance function, that we have not had a CISO at the companies I've worked at. So, granted, business continuity planning, incident response planning, that doesn't always fall to the general counsel. In my experience, it has. So, so that's, that's the place I'm speaking from when I talk about it here. Very cute. Kisses in the middle of the day. This is another part of the upside, I have to say. So that's nice too. So yeah, so it's fallen to me. And I guess, so I like the question of, what is a business continuity plan? Because when all of a sudden you have a crisis, you have this major disaster, it would be great if you could just go to Practical Law or you could go to Google and just download a business continuity plan and then check that off your list and be like, oh, good, it's done. We have it. We have a COVID specific business continuity plan, but it doesn't work that way because it really, it's not one written document. It doesn't follow one simple, easy formula. It really is much messier than that. So, I think the best way to think about it is business continuity planning itself, which is a process. And that is the process involved in creating a system of prevention and then recovery from potential threats and real threats to a company. And so the plan itself, whether it's like written down on paper or it's in some PowerPoint slides, or maybe it's a series of sticky notes, maybe it's, especially at a smaller company, it's, it's in people's heads and it's, it's articulated in some fashion somewhere, that needs to enable ongoing operations before and then during the execution of your disaster recovery plan. So, that's what the plan is. So it's abstract. It's not an easy thing you can download. So I guess if I talk about like at Watermark, in my current company, so, yes, we have this overarching business continuity plan, but, it was rudimentary, it was non-specific, and it 100% did not contemplate a global pandemic. And I think a lot of companies, especially, smaller companies, probably found themselves in a similar scenario in the aftermath of COVID. So what was clear to me, because I've now, this type of thing has fallen to me at my previous companies, I understood that I was the gatekeeper, right? Like for better or for worse, as general counsel, as the most senior person in charge of risk mitigation for the company, and thinking about compliance obligations, I knew that it was me or it was no one who would be standing on that lookout tower, scanning the horizon, ready to identify, okay, there's a potential threat or there is a threat. So so I was up in that lookout tower, And that's why I spotted COVID, and I understood that even if it was not ever going to become what it did become, it was still a potential threat. And so I pretty much could see that right away, but that's not because I have superpowers. It's because I've done this at my previous companies, and because I just understood, 60% of the battle is having one person who has the mandate and who knows they do, and who is standing on the tower and who's going to shout out when they see a potential threat. So, so that was me at my company. So, and at first I'm in a vacuum, I'm the only one. And, if things had gone a different way, and this pandemic, if this didn't become a pandemic and it didn't really interrupt our business, that would have been fine. I still needed to do what I did, which was, stand on the, be standing at the tower, see it coming, shout it out, and then take the steps that you take, in accordance with that larger business continuity plan, whether or not you're actually going to have a real disruption. Because even when it's just a potential disruption, you're still gathering the task force and starting the action. And that's important in and of itself. So I started to do that. So, I mean, just to very simply break it down, the very first thing is assemble a task force. And so the task force for us, smallish task force, this is the dedicated core team. And so it's myself who would be heading the task force, and then an in-house lawyer that works for me, and our head of security, who is not, super senior, but, is our head of security. So me and these two individuals. So we were the dedicated task force. And then I include the CEO in that task force, because it's very important that you're reporting up into the CEO frequently. So with us, with COVID, we started meeting, we met every single day. We were meeting multiple times a day, and we were also keeping the CEO just up to date every day as the situation started to crystallize. So that was the very first thing we did. Then,
could I just pause for a second and just ask a quick clarifying question, Breen? This is all really great information. And did you have a conversation with your CEO or with any of your team before, COVID, before any of this, and basically just set out expectations hey, I'm the one doing business continuity, just in case you're wondering, I'm the one who's sort of thinking about worst case scenario and helping to make the plan? Or was it just assumed? Because I feel especially with smaller businesses, they might not even know whose job it is to spot these sort of issues. Did you have these conversations?
Right. No, I think that's a great point. And definitely at all of my companies, I've had these conversations. And I do think that the way they begin is by me essentially, educating the management team or the CEO that, oh, there are these things, they might know of a business continuity plan, but they're not thinking about it in terms of, the mechanics, who's, they're not thinking they need to appoint someone to be in charge. When there isn't a crisis, it's just this general feeling of, oh, there is some sort of, continuity plan, or there's an incident response plan. Maybe it's security, or it's some person has drafted it. They don't really know where it sits. Is it one document? Is it multiple documents? So definitely I've had that conversation at all the companies, which is, I'm in charge of compliance, I'm in charge of risk, whether, and at different companies, there have been different dedicated teams. At my previous company, we did have a team that was larger, that was focused on security privacy. So it was more of a shared, a shared undertaking. But definitely, yes, just making sure everyone's on the same page with, these are the types of, processes and plans that an organization of this size should be aware of, should be thinking of, should have in place, should dedicate team members for. And, I'm overseeing it because I'm thinking about the existential risk to the organization. So yes, I mean, I've definitely had those conversations.
And I would assume that different, risks warrant different business continuity plans. Is that true? Or are all of them very similar?
So like we talked about, there isn't any one thing that you can go find and download. So I think a lot of times a business continuity plan, the overarching plan, is having a series of specific response plans in place. So, for instance, you might, when it comes to data breach, security issues, you might have an incident response plan and a task force that you would spin up in connection with that particular plan. And that is something that is a component of, this larger preparedness that an organization should have in place, that is the business continuity plan overall. And for instance, here with COVID, having a COVID specific response plan, that is something that is necessary in ensuring a continuous business operation when a global pandemic hits. So, so I think most companies have found themselves, scrambling to create a COVID specific response plan. Now, maybe there are some companies, that would have a whole dedicated team that has thought through every single possible scenario, and they might have, a pandemic preparedness response plan, at the ready that they can sort of, pull out of their files. But I don't think that's the case for a lot of companies. So, and it was not the case for us. So we certainly constructed it. And so, to the degree that it's helpful, considering our member base, like we have a lot of GCs, we also have, founders who might not have a GC. So that was partially why, we felt this would be interesting to, for me to let you guys know, really step by step what we've done. And I do feel like it's been effective. I mean, so far, right, we're 3 weeks in, which is amazing, because like these 3 weeks have honestly been 5 years, but we're 3 weeks in, and I think this has been very effective for our organization. And we have a subsidiary in India, and so there was a lot of complexity there. We have offices in different states. So it was not easy for us to transition to 100% remote and to have zero travel and all of the other restrictions that came down that were part of dealing with this pandemic. So I do not think that we would have been able to have zero interruption essentially to our business over this past 3 weeks if this plan hadn't worked. So I guess that's how I would endorse it.
Wow, congratulations. I mean, that's pretty impressive that you were able to see it so early and start the plans and really get the buy-in from your CEO, from people on the task force, because, I know that some people were just like, oh, this is not going to impact us. Like, what's the point? I'm sure you got pushback.
Yeah, no,
How do you deal with pushback?
Right. So I definitely got pushback. The reason why I was alert to this risk just kind of early on and understood I needed to do something it's actually because of previous experiences I've had at other companies where, no, it was not a global pandemic. In fact, the incident or the emergency that occurred, in retrospect, I mean, nothing, right? Like basically kind of like a fire drill. But thank goodness, because by having those fire drills, like, I just found myself in the position of being tasked with understanding that we needed the plan in the first place, and then drafting the plan or finding people to help me draft the plans. And then we had a couple of incidents that occurred that actually were not that big of a deal, but they they triggered the plan, the response plan. So I had the experience firsthand having to respond, spin up the team and follow a cadence and, actually be able to, have a cross-functional effort and then be making decisions that had an impact across the company and do it very quickly in response to a crisis. So it was great practice, and this happened twice in the past. And so when this was occurring, I just thought of it that same way. And, and it absolutely, this could have been nothing. And then I just would have run through the exercise like I did at my previous companies, where, you know, it doesn't matter. You're still documenting that you ran through the exercise, because that in and of itself has compliance value and has a benefit to the organization. And I just would be doing my job. And it would, you know, if anything, people would be like, oh, you know, Breena's less bandwidth because she's distracted doing this thing that we don't really understand, but she says, you know, it's important. And so, you know, so it probably is worth her time, but it probably would have been that. You know, and in the very beginning, I feel like that is how people around me were reacting. So, but then as we all experienced with COVID, it was just, I mean, it was just a tsunami. It was like, it started, you know, I think up until like March 6th, you know, it seemed like there were people who didn't even really know what coronavirus was. And then it was just a totally different world on March 9th.
So, and yeah, it sounds like you were able to get ahead of it sooner rather than later and get the buy-ins. What are some of like the most important things that you need to focus on when crafting a business continuity plan, or even when like thinking about what kind of incident warrants a business continuity plan?
So, I mean, so I think what you're really focusing on is anything that is threatening to disrupt or actually disrupting business processes that are essential in order for your company, you know, to have the output and take in the money, right? Like anything that's going to get in the way there, anything, and on the privacy data side, a breach. I mean, anything that is threatening the integrity of the organization.
Yeah, so, I mean, for me personally, from my experience, that was the business continuity plans that I was used to putting together was a breach. And I think that was like the traditional thing, like what could go wrong in a company that, you know, takes in customer data. And that was the kind of companies that I worked at, right? And that was a breach. And that was the things that really got us worried. But I think now pandemic is like way worse than a breach, and it's on everyone's heads. But I could imagine that it was a little bit more difficult to even visualize for your team, like what this could mean to the entire company versus a breach, what you hear about day in and day out.
And so what we did, so quickly we assembled this task force. You know, we basically locked ourselves in this conference room. We were joking, we were calling it the war room. And we just started like whiteboarding. Like we just started thinking about, okay, what really is just the like universal business impact. Like, you know, and then so we started by just imagining sort of minimal disruption, moderate disruption, and extreme disruption. So back then, you know, on March 4th or whatever it was, you know, extreme disruption seemed impossible. You know, that was, we were making fun of each other. We're like, oh, we're crazy. We're like sitting in this room, you know, talking about potentially like mail not getting delivered. Like this is New York City, you know, or the subway not running, you know, so we were joking about it, but we just kind of came up with this code yellow, code orange, code red, and started thinking through, you know, just essential, universal, you know, business impact, what could keep it from functioning, like very basic. Like if minimal disruption, not much, right? It's pretty minimal. It's maybe just a certain subsection of employees who are at high risk are going to work remotely. You know, maybe a certain employee might not travel somewhere. Like it's very minimal. So it's very easy to start to think about, you know, across the different stakeholders and across the different functions in the company, what would a minimal disruption, you know, how would that impact people in terms of, you know, their ability to show up at the office, travel, and, you know, their health and well-being, ability to perform their roles. Then you get to the moderate contingency, and then it starts to look a little bit different. And then when you get to the extreme, you really start to see, okay, there's a whole lot of things we would have to do and get out in front of in order to ensure a continuous business process if we're in an extreme scenario. Like just thinking about, you know, those basic things, like employee ability to show up to the office, employee health and well-being, you know, travel restrictions, and ability to access like physical infrastructure. So once we had that picture in our mind, then what we did is we created a bunch of Google surveys. And then we sent these survey documents to stakeholders, like every stakeholder in the company who was knowledgeable about a particular team that, that had a particular function. So then we got these stakeholders to give us answers. And, over a couple of days, we condensed all of this information we collected into a chart that, that we created. And then that chart evolved into a phased contingency plan, which actually we are still using in our COVID specific response plan. So, and many of these, like all of these documents, like an anonymized, clean version of the templates that we've used and the COVID specific response plan that I created, that is this living framework that incorporates the other documents, we are making available to our members through the website, because I think they're really helpful, or I hope they are. So anyway, so that's why I'm being that specific referencing it. But so, so we give the surveys, we get the information, we condense it, we turn it into this phased contingency plan to ensure the universal business continuity. And we broke that up temporally. So like, what are the things we need to do in the next 3 days? What are the things we need to do in the next 10 days? What are the things we need to do in the next 2 weeks? So, so that was really, really helpful in order for us to very quickly get all of our US offices and our Indian subsidiary set up to work 100% remote. And we did that like just under the wire in India, because India was really hard. There's actually a lot of complexity when it comes to a secure power source, internet. Like, this was not easy in India. I mean, of course, there was a lot of equipment we needed to buy, but it was more complicated than that. And at the time when we first started these efforts on March 4th, March 5th, it was inconceivable that India would ever require their citizens to work from home because of coronavirus. I mean, like, I remember I had conversations with my CEO. He was like, it's different in India. It's just, they have malaria. Malaria is a bigger threat. Like, this is just, the government's not going to freak out over, a virus. Like no one, this seemed incomprehensible. But at the end of the day, because we got that motion started immediately and we had all the information and we were able to put it into this phase contingency plan, and then the dedicated task force really, implemented it with IT and with DevOps and, the different departments that could step in and actually source the goods or, make sure the power source was there. So we had that all set up and in place, over the next 2 weeks as the situation became more and more dire. So by the time we got to, March 23rd, when India was like totally shut down by law, we were good. Like, we had our whole workforce had transitioned. So, so that was the first piece, but then that's only part of it. And, and there's this whole other aspect that is, equally important, if not even more important, which was identifying work streams across the organization. So this is separate from just that first initial, sort of just like very physical, making sure your employees are healthy, making sure they're there. Oh, and the last piece I'd say about that first part, though, is succession planning. So that's also really important. So we made sure everyone could work remotely, and that everything was functional, and and we came up with these these ways to work around things like mail needing to get delivered to a physical location. And then the last piece of that is succession planning. So that's another template that we've also made available, but it's we came up with a succession planning template chart survey that we're having every single manager in our organization complete for every single person that works for them, because it's a pandemic. People might be unavailable to work at different times. And so that's another critical piece, and that falls in that first bucket. But then the second bucket, the next thing we did was to identify work streams. So what we saw as the most critical work streams, and we came up with 7 for our company. There are 6 that I have included in my COVID specific response plan template. That's just general. Every company is different. You might have more or less, additional work streams, but basically a work stream it's like for us, the first would be employee health and ability to perform roles, which is very much, that's encapsulated in what I've just told you about. The second is financial stress testing and contingency plan development. So this is on the finance side. That is totally separate from everything else we just talked about, but critically important, obviously, to the company being able to maintain its critical business processes. And then for us, marketing and sales, and then coordination and internal, external communication, so coordinating all those communications. And then the fifth work stream, production development, engineering, uptime, platform functioning. We're a tech company. We have multiple platforms. That's obviously a mission critical work stream. And then, the last work stream, which I think is probably relevant to every single company, is competitive outperformance during a crisis. So, just like the upside, we're talking about, in all of this volatility, there is incredible opportunity for innovation. Similarly, whatever your company does, there very well might be some opportunity there. So that's a work stream we identified as well. So then once we had these 6 work streams, what we did is we appointed stakeholders, executives in the organization to own those work streams. And then those work stream owners, together with the dedicated task force, became the larger COVID response team. And so now at this point, we have this sizable COVID response team. We have this basic framework for a COVID specific business continuity response plan that includes that, contingency plan that's phased over time to ensure that, employees can work, we have succession planning, everyone can work remotely. And so now, once we had that structure, then we created these charts that we call business impact assessment charts. And we created 1 chart per work stream, and we gave each work stream owner, their own chart. And, it's funny because the chart evolved over time. On March 9th or whenever it was that we created the first one, we had the minimal, moderate, and extreme. On March 17th, we had to redo our business impact assessment charts that we gave to these workstream owners to just have extreme, and then oh my God, there's a red door, I want to paint it black. I don't know, like really bad. So, we recasted the charts, and people had to update, but essentially what goes in the chart is the same, whether it was not so bad or it's really bad. It's asking the workstream owner to identify, what are the key considerations for this work stream. So if it's financial, if it's the CFO and he's thinking about, financial stress testing and contingency plan development, okay, what are the key considerations here? So he's thinking about cash. He's thinking about, certainly checks coming in and getting deposited, but he's thinking about the covenants that you owe your lender, if you have a debt facility. He's thinking about, EBITDA. He's thinking about all types of things, right? So in that work stream, he's identifying these key considerations. Then he's identifying the risks that the scenario is presenting to that key consideration. And then out of that, he creates action steps. So action items. So that's what the business impact assessment chart, that's how it's constructed. It's very simple. And that's what it helps each work stream owner do. So they think through over time, they ultimately are arriving at action plan, right? Like action steps. And so now we have this overarching COVID response team. We start meeting once a week. So we set that regular cadence for meetings. It's a shared document through Google Docs. So all of the COVID response team owners can access the document. Each work stream owner knows that they have their BIA chart that they're supposed to be, kind of updating and thinking about. And, if they encounter some new key consideration or obstacle or risk, then they're putting it in there. And so then that works in concert with this COVID specific response plan that they update each week to reflect the action items for that week. So, so far it's worked really well. So we've had 3 of these weekly, fully assembled COVID response team meetings where we go through and we're like, okay, week of March 16th, what were the action items that we identified for all of these work streams, and what's the status? And then, then we meet again on March 23rd, and it's like, okay, well, what's the progress? What's been completed? Are there new ones? Do we iterate? Do we modify? So that's basically the structure of this. I know that was a ton of stuff.
That was a lot of information. What really was wonderful to hear. And I think the reason why, and first of all, congratulations on 1, spotting this early, 2, getting buy-in from your CEO and all of the executive team that this was really important, and 3, having a process in place that you could iterate on, even though you went from low, medium, oh my God, the world is exploding. Okay, it could explode even worse, going in that direction. But what I really loved about your story or the way you handled it is the number of people that had buy-in and that you must have talked to ensure that, that people felt an ownership over the plan, because you weren't just coming down from above and basically saying, well, I'm the general counsel and you have to do this. You were really speaking to them and making sure that they owned their own processes. And I'm sure that was part of the reason why it worked out. Do you think that am I right? Is that one of the reasons?
Well, I do think my CEO was absolutely, pretty quickly, he came around pretty quickly to just, to be fully in support of, of the effort. So I think if you had a CEO that was not fully in support, I think it would be totally different. Because there was still wrangling involved for sure. Getting the chief product officer to fill out his business impact assessment chart, not easy. I think he put in 1 consideration. So that takes some work. But yes, you need buy-in from the CEO, and I was lucky to have that for sure.
Yeah. So that's great, and I think that's probably in your templates. That's probably an assumption, right? That you're going to get buy-in from your CEO and that people are going to see this as a big risk and want to prioritize it over other things, right?
Right. And I do think even if the CEO, say, my CEO was out to lunch for some reason, I do think that the work stream owners, they are the owners of those, the CFO cares about the financial well-being of the company. And, the CFO realizes, oh God, there's a pandemic, and now all of our clients, which in our case are universities, they're all shutting down, and, they're completely in crisis because they're trying to get their international students home. And so the last thing they're thinking about is, oh, let me negotiate, your subscription agreement for your software product. That is the last thing they're thinking about. But that can have a ripple effect across a company when you're talking about new business being signed, renewals being signed, bringing in cash for a SaaS business.
So what does the new normal, now that you made the crisis plan or the business continuity plan, and now you're in the plan? Now, at first you said that it was weekly, then it went daily, and now it's back to weekly?
So the task force is meeting daily no matter what. So that is sort of this dedicated internal team of, the 3 of us, and then reporting into the CEO. So that task force, we keep meeting, every single day, because we're in the thick of the succession planning right now. So we're certainly, it's an ongoing work. The work stream owners, so the larger response team, is meeting once a week. That cadence feels right to push forward these work streams. I could imagine, that it might be different for different organizations. I think, and we're 400 people, right? We're not a huge company. We're also not a tiny company. Depending on the size, you probably have, would need to, your need for granularity or visibility into those work streams, I'm sure would be different. But for us, that has worked so far. Granted, we're 3 weeks in, So hopefully we will be continuing to, this is the right motion for those work streams. I think it is. And actually out of one of our meetings came the, our 7th work stream, which was the competitive advantage in a crisis, because as part of all of us, meeting and talking through and going through the different work streams and just thinking about, how are we maintaining and preventing disruption, then we realized, wait, there's really this other work stream that is not just purely reactive, it's actually proactive too. And so, so I think in that sense right there, that's evidence that, this structure has been helpful for us, to navigate the crisis, because we need some competitive advantage to offset the difficulty.
That's the upside. That's you found the upside in the work streams. That's exactly what you did. And before I open this up to questions, because we're running short on time, I just wanted to ask a very specific question about insurance. How did you, when you're thinking about like your business continuity plan, how did you think about insurance?
Okay, that's a great question, actually, because always that's one of the first things you need to do is reach out to your insurance carriers and check in and see, because obviously if you're having this massive disruption, hopefully it's covered. Now, the thing is, my understanding is that a lot of insurance policies that would come into play here, and mostly, I mean, in certain instances, maybe it would be D&O, but only if you're like, if there's securities issues. It's mostly, it's your general liability, the insurance that covers, equipment and the office, and that's it seems, at least I believe, and I'm not an expert, that those are the policies where you would be able to submit a claim and receive business interruption coverage. And so we've done that. We've initiated the claim, because obviously that was one of the first questions I asked was, well, what insurance might be at play here? And I reached out to my broker, had a conversation with him. That's basically, I mean, that's where he brought me. I trusted him, 50-50. So then I went to the Women's General Counsel Network, and then I ended up also calling a lawyer that I was, that was given as a reference from that network, who seconded what he said, which was, this really was the policy for us that I would look to submit a claim. So we did submit a claim. We don't have a virus carve out, but a lot of people do. So, which is super sneaky. I'm sure post-COVID, every single insurance coverage is gonna have a virus carve out, but we luckily do not have a virus carve out. So, but it's still attenuated. Like, it's going to take some verbal gymnastics, or I guess written gymnastics, to make the case that that we qualify for business interruption coverage. I'm very optimistic that, we can get some money from that. Oh, also loans, SBA loans, the stimulus package. That's another thing that all companies, small to mid-size, should explore about whether they could qualify for some of this money in this stimulus bill.
And also your contracts, I'm sure you looked through some of your substantial contracts to look at force majeure clauses and that sort of thing. That was probably part of your...
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because, and I think a lot of, the other thing is that because of the stimulus package coming out, they're, they're heavily weighted towards, they're going to bail out or benefit, like hospitality and travel to some degree. And so that's helpful for many companies, because you will, they're going to bear more of the risk in the scenario. And so they're forgiving, like, because we've done that with our contracts, like gone to say Marriott, and we're like, this is force majeure, but we haven't even really needed to make the argument, because they're already, that's how they're approaching this.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for making those resources available to our community. I think they're really valuable. You clearly put a lot of time, a lot of thought, a lot of research into it. So thanks. And thanks for quickly putting together this talk. Before I open this up to questions, I just wanted to do a couple housekeeping things. We have a bunch of upcoming events. Some are only for members. So for example, our happy hours are only for members. We have a happy hour tomorrow at 4 p.m. But we also have events that are for non-members or for anybody. We're having an event on Monday at 3 p.m. called Going Slow. And I'm very excited by this event because I cannot go slow. I'm a big spaz. So we're going to hear from an expert who basically went from New York City living to going really slow upstate and hearing what she has to say about it. And then on Wednesday, we're going to learn from Dee Dee about paying it forward, and we're going to hear more about the upside of paying it forward. And then on Friday, the 3rd, we're going to have a happy hour, and we're going to learn how to make cheese plates. So that's going to be so fun for our happy hour. We're having a cheese monger. Yes, teach us how to make cheese plates. She's legit. So anyway, follow us on LinkedIn. And if you're a member, you can have Google groups and you have a directory. And so now we'll open this up to any questions that anyone has for Breen about business continuity. Just unmute and ask away.
I have a question. Yeah, so given kind of these crises, besides like operational continuity, how do you handle mental health and kind of shock? Like, especially like we're still probably in some denial phase, hopefully not too much longer in the denial phase. But once it gets like, if you can proceed forwards, I'm imagining there's gonna be loss and suffering. So how do you address, and how do you keep, because the mental health from as part of the continuity process?
That's a great question, and I think that's one that I would like to explore further. I know that in what we've done so far is reach out to our benefits insurance carriers and see what, if anything, they're extending, they're offering and making available along those lines. And actually, it is interesting that there are hotlines for mental health that have been made available by insurance carriers. And I think this is kind of happening across the board. There's also, actually, we have, for instance, a founder in our network who has a company that is telemedicine, but for mental health issues. So, so that's just one example that, springs to mind immediately about, possible upside, right? There might be such a large need for something like that it changes the conversation a little bit about mental health needs, and the fact that many of us are a couple of heartbeats away from being the worried well. Certainly I'm like a quasi hypochondriac, so this is unbelievably stressful. So I think it's a really interesting question, and I think it's very important, and we're starting to deal with it. It's starting to happen. Like, we're starting to have employees who are sick, and and people are scared, and it's you can't just ignore it. Like, it is part of the well-being of employees. So I don't know, but I would like to know more.
Any other questions for Breen before we wave and dance each other off? So, okay, before we leave, that mental health question is so important to all of us. And one of the things we're trying to do at the 4th floor is just keep bringing community together and keep talking, because I think that that's one way we can combat it. But obviously there are other resources that people need to take advantage of, because this is just so difficult for everybody. But before we go, like, Breen, just in one sentence, you already kind of talked about this a little bit. Like, let's end on a high note, and just tell me about the upside. Like, tell me just a couple sentences about where you see the future of work, the future of legal, the future of the 4th floor, and like, or even the world. What's the upside? What's the upside to all this?
Okay, just a little question. Well, okay, so I don't know. One thing that's crazy is, who knew the 4th floor could go virtual? Because if you think about it, the 4th floor, like, we have all of, these great in-person events that we're excited to get back to when the world, becomes normal again, but we can be virtual. And, and I think we were always kind of aware of this, thus we created, sorry, this is my children. Thus, we created, the platform, the room, which right now is in beta and very rudimentary, accessible to members. But we've, like, this is such an opportunity for us to, to leverage, I think, digital resources that will help us just reach a broader audience of people, so that we can, scale and make a difference. And, and then the bigger idea of the upside we have so many incredible founders that are creating, you know, incredible, you know, they have great innovations, ideas, technologies that maybe, you know, weren't going to gain traction, but now, you know, now they can, and we can help them do that. And we can hopefully reach, you know, a broad group of people, and maybe even a broader group of people in different geographic locations because we're virtual. So is that the upside? Did I touch on?
You
I
did.
didn't
You
get
did.
the law, but
You did. You did. Thank you so much, Breen, and thank you everyone for joining us. And until next time, this was the fourth floor in the upside. So take care. Bye.
thank you.